So you've planted your tomatoes, fertilized and pruned them so they are healthy and happy. So happy that the vines are loaded with lovely fruit. So much fruit. Now what are you going to do with all of those tomatoes? Well, we use a lot of tomatoes in chilies and soups over the winter, and we are completely out of canned tomatoes, and I need to restock our stores. So today I'll show you how easy canning tomatoes is. Tomatoes are a high-acid food, so they can be water bath canned, and you don't have to have a pressure canner to preserve them for long-term storage. It is also fine to pressure can them if you like. And the USDA states that pressure canning will result in a higher quality, more nutritious tomato product. My water bath canner will hold 7-quart jars, and to fill these jars, I'm going to need about 22 pounds of tomatoes. If you want to can pint jars, you will need 7 jars and about 14 pounds of tomatoes. In order to ensure that the acid is at the correct level, 4.6 pH or lower, you will also need to either add citric acid powder or lemon juice. Adding salt is optional and has nothing to do with preserving your food. In order to control the amount of salt that goes into your food, you can add it when making your meal. This is a hot pack method, so you will need clean hot jars, hot tomatoes, and hot water in your canner. First, fill your water bath canner a little over halfway with water. Ultimately, you will need the water level to be an inch or two above the jars, but the jars will displace a lot of water and you don't want it to overflow, causing a big hot mess. So start with just over half full. It would be a good idea to have a kettle of hot water ready to top off everything once the jars are in the canner. Next, bring another large pot of water to boil and set up a large bowl of ice water. There's a lot of water involved in canning. Wash your tomatoes, and then you will need to remove the skins from the tomatoes. So first cut the core out of the tomato, remove any blemishes, and cut a shallow X in the bottoms to help the skins slip off. Add a few of the washed and cored tomatoes to the boiling water and leave them in for a minute or two. Then transfer them to the ice water for 3 to 5 minutes. When you take them out of the ice water, the skin should slip off easily. Cut these skinned tomatoes into quarters and place about a dozen of them in a pot on low heat to heat them up. Mash these tomatoes slightly to release the juices and then add the rest of the tomatoes to the pot. Bring it to a gentle boil for about 5 minutes. Keep stirring the tomatoes so they don't burn. By the way, do not discard the skins. There is a lot of flavor and nutrients in these skins. You can dehydrate them to turn into tomato powder that can be turned into a tomato paste when you only need a small amount and not a whole can. Now it's time to fill the jars. If you use a dishwasher to wash your jars just before you are going to fill them, they will still be hot. Remove 7 hot quart jars and add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice to each quart jar, or 1 tablespoon to each pint jar. Instead of lemon juice, you can use citric acid to make sure your pH is below 4.6. For quart jars, use a half a teaspoon of citric acid, and for pint jars, use a 1/4 teaspoon. If you want to add salt, and it's not necessary, use up to 1 teaspoon for quarts or a half a teaspoon per pint. Fill the hot jars with the hot tomatoes and leave 1/2 inch headspace in each jar. Remove any air bubbles that may be present and readjust the headspace as needed. Wipe the rims of the jars with a clean damp cloth to make sure there is no food between the jar and the lid that would prevent the jars from sealing properly. Place the lids on the jars and then tighten the ring to finger tight only. Do not over tighten the rings, as this may cause seal failure. Carefully place each jar in the canner with the hot water using a jar lifter, then cover the canner with the lid. If you live at an altitude of 1,000 feet or less, you need to process your quarts for 40 minutes or your pints for 35 minutes. If you live above 1,000 feet above sea level, you will need to adjust your processing time for your altitude. Once your processing time is complete, turn off the heat, remove the canner lid, and allow everything to sit for 5 to 10 minutes. Then carefully remove each jar with your jar lifter and place them on a cooling rack or a towel on the counter in an out of the way, draft-free area. The jars need to sit for at least 12 to 24 hours undisturbed to allow them to seal, so you don't want them sitting in the way. Also, never put your jars directly on the countertop, as you risk thermal shock. And any cold breeze on hot jars can also risk breaking your jars, so in front of a window or a fan isn't a great choice. Soon you should start hearing the music every canner wants to hear, the ping of jars sealing. Do not touch the jars until they are completely cooled so you don't interfere with the sealing process. Just sit back and listen to the music. After 12 hours, if the jars are completely cool, check them to make sure each one is sealed. There are 3 ways to check your jars are sealed properly. Number 1 is to press down on the center of the lid. If the lid pops up when you release it, it's not sealed. Number 2, tap the lid with a teaspoon. If it makes a ringing sound, it is sealed. If it makes a dull thud, it is not sealed. Number 3, the top of the jar should curve slightly down in the center. Hold your jar at eye level to make sure this is so. If it is flat or bulging, you don't have a good seal. So what do you do with jars that didn't seal properly? You can store them in the refrigerator for a few days, but use them within the next week. Or you can reprocess them to see if they will seal. Remove the ring and lid. Wipe down the ring of the jar very well to make sure there is no food present. Check the ring for any chips you might have missed earlier. Toss the original lid and use a new one. Apply your ring finger tight and water bath the jar for the original amount of time, 40 minutes for a quart. If it seals properly, you can put your jar into long-term storage. If it fails again, make some soup this week. After 24 hours, remove the rings, wipe down the jars to get them clean, and make sure to label them. While your canned food is safe to eat for as long as the seal is intact, they do start to lose nutrients after about a year, so it is best to use them within 12 to 18 months. Store your canned tomatoes in a cool, dark place with the rings off to prevent a false seal. Thanks for stopping by the old Mayfield place today. Stay healthy, get your tomatoes canned, and have a blessed week.